They are the deadliest predators on the planet.
This was somebody that was interested in inflicting pain, and I was sure people had died there.
No killer is as cold, cunning, or bloodthirsty.
Police think they may be the remains of 15 victims of yet another so-called serial killer.
And they may be closer than you think.
He's the guy who's behind you in the supermarket line.
These killers don't hunt in search of food. They pursue perverted fantasies.
He became sexually aroused when he watched his grandmother kill a chicken, and he wanted to replicate that.
And they lust for power and control.
The death is prolonged in such a way that every excruciating pain that is imaginable is part of the thrill.
What creates these cold-blooded monsters? What drives their warped psyches?
There's the fusion of a sexual thought with violence, and it becomes sexually arousing to them.
Now, rare recordings of the voices and visions of serial killers.
I got the hand on her and got a nylon sock and started strangling.
Plunge us deep inside their complex and twisted minds. Serial Psyche. March 22nd, 1999. A terrified woman runs down a country road. She's naked, except for a metal dog collar attached to a 6-foot chain. The young woman barges into a double-wide trailer, screaming for help. The homeowner calls 911.
Yes, I'm calling for a young lady that ran into the house saying she'd been raped. She's got a chain on her and everything. Please send someone right away. This lady is naked and everything else. She said they'd been holding her for 3 days.
And she told this amazing story, and this story was that she had been abducted in Albuquerque, that she had been chained up and kept in a sunken room in this man's house, chained to a post. She had a bed and she had a bucket for a toilet, and she had been systematically raped and tortured over a period of 3 days.
The woman's name is Cynthia Vigil. It's clear she has looked into the eyes of pure evil. Cynthia directs police to the home of David Parker Ray. And what they find there leads them to one of history's most horrifying series of crimes.
So when the sheriff's department responds into this house, they discover everything is exactly supports what Cindy Vigil's account of events were.
They find a room in disarray with clear signs of a struggle. Rich Leibeser is the lead case agent for the New Mexico State Police.
They soon went down one of the short hallways into another room, which they thought was a bedroom, and discovered all kinds of sadomasochistic sexual devices, the likes of which nobody had ever seen, that did not appear designed for pleasure. They definitely appeared designed to inflict pain. They had all been modified. Some had nails melted into the plastic and bent.
Then, police find a trailer next to the house, and none of them are prepared for what they discover.
So when you walk in the trailer, the first thing you're going to see is the centerpiece, which is a gynecological chair. A black gynecological chair, and immediately suspended above it is this rack of harnesses and pulleys and trusses, all of which had manacles on them. On the walls adjacent to it are devices that made the devices inside the house look like kids' toys. These were obviously painful kind of implements. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. This space was evil. This space was sinister and mean.
David Parker Ray calls this $100,000 soundproofed torture chamber his toy box.
As soon as I went into the trailer and saw what was inside the utility trailer, I had two reactions. First of all, I knew we were dealing with somebody that was very, very accomplished at this behavior, whatever it was. They were obviously consumed by this. This was very important to them, whatever was going on in this trailer. Second of all, I was sure people had died there.
David Parker Ray is a serial killer. This label places him in the most heinous category of these offenders. He's a psychopathic serial sexual sadist. Dr. Michael Stone and Dr. Gary Brucato are experts on violent crime, including serial sexual homicide. Together they authored the book, The New Evil: Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime.
David Parker Ray being an example of a charming man would go to bars and lure either prostitutes or other women who would be willing to go with him for a night of drinking, to his house, only to then end up an infamous toy box mobile home that he converted into a torture chamber.
Cynthia Vigil is a 21-year-old prostitute and heroin addict. Ray knows her disappearance is unlikely to arouse suspicion. He can take his time with his victim, and she will experience unspeakable torture.
Hanging on the wall inside the utility room was a checklist, and it was how to handle a captured victim. And it had check boxes next to it, but it was an instruction manual how to deal with an abducted woman who was being tortured.
But before the torture began, the woman might be drugged and chained or hoisted to the ceiling and forced to listen to an extremely long, droning tape of Ray describing in detail all of the acts to which she was going to be subjected.
Commander Vernon Gebreth is a world-renowned homicide investigator. He trains law enforcement on how to deal with these extreme killers. Ray's introductory tape is a powerful element in his lectures to police officers.
This is probably one of the most horrendous tapes I've ever heard. And there's a few, I've heard some bad ones. I've heard of tapes of people being tortured, sexually tortured, but this one is terrible because you have that psychopathic monotone voice talking about what he's going to do to this party. And it's outrageous. And the tape describes what's going to happen to them. I'll play a segment.
Hello there, bitch. Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained, gagged, probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared too, I would imagine. Perfectly normal under the circumstances. For a little while at least, you need to get your together. It is very relevant to your situation. I'm going to tell you in detail why you have been kidnapped, what's going to happen to you, and how long you'll be here.
That is scary. Did you hear that voice? He recorded that tape in July 23rd, 1993. I can't imagine how many women heard that tape before they were tortured and or killed. It's horrible.
Ray's tape is carefully designed to induce maximum terror and strip away any last shred of power, hope, or personal identity. This is key in satisfying the sexual sadist.
This is another part of that kind of meticulous behavior, but he had crafted this kind of ominous welcome to them just to put them in a psychological state of terror. And I think that's a method of control, but it's also, I think, because David enjoyed seeing fear and pain in another person.
Important element in a sadistic man committing serial sexual homicide is the reveling, the joyfulness in causing intense pain and humiliation to another human being.
The torture of that individual becomes sometimes a means in and of itself. The death is prolonged in such a way that every excruciating pain that is imaginable is part of the thrill.
David Parker Ray didn't want to kill him. He wants to cause them pain. It's the infliction of pain and watching the victims suffer that was exciting for him.
The tape offers insight into David Parker Ray's motives.
In my case, I cannot get off with a girl unless I hurt her first. That's basically the reason I'm into rape and slavery, and the reason that you're going to be subjected to a certain amount of pain. Actually, that pretty well covers it.
Yes, instilling the fear, psychologically breaking them down, making them compliant, and if you hear what he says, is that he is basically telling them, if you are docile and you work and you go along with this, you may eventually be released. So there's that hope. There's that piece of hope out there that maybe I'll get out of this, but it's going to hurt.
For Ray, prolonging the torture is critical.
He had knowledge of things like medical techniques where he would bring a person close to the brink of death and then revive them with medical equipment so that the individual did not die during the act, as much as they may have wished at the moment that they would have died.
Well, I believe I've told you about everything that I can. I cannot predict the future. I can't predict changes of procedure. And I can only give you advice. Be smart and be a survivor. Don't ever scream. Don't talk without permission. Be very quiet. Be docile and obedient. And by all means, show proper respect. Have a nice day.
David Parker Ray's crimes span more than 40 years. He's believed to have brutally tortured and killed more than 50 women.
I mean, investigatively speaking, I'd call him a human predator. Clinically speaking, I'd say he's a psychopathic sexual sadist. Theologically speaking, I'd call him the devil on earth. He's like a ghost, not looking for fame and glory or recognition, simply slipping through society like a dark cloud.
The most heinous breed of serial killers are identified as psychopathic sexual sadists. For them, murder is not enough. These monsters are addicted to rape and torture before they kill. At the core of their evil is that they are psychopaths. This is the diagnosis of 95% of serial killers. Dr. Brianna Fox is an expert on psychopaths, serial killers, and violent offenders.
A psychopath is somebody who is narcissistic, cold and callous. They have very low empathy for others, and they're very willing to break laws and norms to do exactly what they want. This is somebody who doesn't have a lot of emotion and who doesn't really feel bad when they commit crimes or hurt others. All of that is very characteristic of someone who's willing to commit crimes against other people, including murder.
Certainly, not all psychopaths are criminals, but it's frequently a trait of serial killers. And what makes them extraordinary is just how ordinary they appear. David Parker Ray is a master mechanic for the New Mexico State Parks Department.
He was very clever, if you think about it. Here he is, a state employee. I believe in 1995 he got an Employee of the Year award, okay? Because nobody knew what he was doing back in his little compound. He's a reliable employee. We don't need to supervise him. So here's a guy who's operating all separately from everybody else, and on the surface, everything looks fine.
Ray uses his psychopath's charm to convince victims to come to his home, only to end up in his so-called toy box. One of Ray's favorite tricks is to pose as a police officer. Investigators find authentic uniforms, gear, and badges in his home. Cynthia Vigil, the escapee from the toy box, had been lured in by this deceit.
One morning I was walking to a restaurant and this guy came up to me and told me that he had asked for me. So I went over there and he acted like a cop and told me I was under arrest. And he put his handcuffs on me and he had me in his trailer and he drove me to Elton Beach. And he did a lot of sick stuff.
Vigil quickly becomes one of David Parker Ray's sex slaves. He is now her master. She's horrified to find out that Ray has an accomplice. The toy box is also ruled by a mistress. New Mexico State Police investigate the home of 59-year-old David Parker Ray, a suspected sadistic serial killer. They find a soundproofed trailer outfitted as a torture chamber. The tools they discover inside the dungeon offer clear evidence of acts of unimaginable cruelty and terrifying insight into the mind of a psychopathic serial sexual sadist. But meanwhile, to his neighbors and co-workers, Ray is just a friendly, regular guy.
When you spoke to David, the David that you got was an intelligent, articulate, kind of wry sense of humor. You never got the feeling when you were talking to him that you were dealing with somebody that was inherently evil or was capable of this kind of behavior. He was excellent at shielding that part of himself from anybody.
David Parker Ray's charm not only attracts victims. In a shocking revelation, investigators discover that he has convinced accomplices to assist in his heinous acts, including his own daughter, Jessie Ray.
Also, he had a daughter that lure women to the toy box. But there was one incident where she bopped a woman over the head in a bar with a beer bottle after drugging her. And they brought her home and she was tortured.
Ray also has a live-in girlfriend who becomes his partner in crime for several years, named Cindy Hendy. Ray is the dungeon master. Hendy is the mistress. Shockingly, Cindy Hendy and Jessie Ray lure in victims, and Hendy also participates in the torture of the young women.
The fact that he incorporated a female accomplice, that's not very common. Not many serial killers have a female accomplice that actually participates in the sexual assault of another woman. While she was with him, she talks about doing 18 packages. Those are victims.
During this time, Ray also persuades a friend of Jessie's named Roy Yancey to join the group. Ray convinces Yancey to murder one of their torture victims, Marie Parker. Together, they dump her body in the desert outside of Truth or Consequences.
David seemed to have this ability to manipulate people, and he would surround himself with people who were easily controlled and easily manipulated, and who were much less intelligent than he was. As in a manner of speaking, he's brainwashing them. He's providing them with the things they want. He's making them feel good about themselves. He's filling a hole somehow in their life, and out of gratitude for that, or whatever that is, or out of this idea that they have this meaningful relationship with him, they'll basically do whatever he wants them to do.
After Cynthia Vigil's escape and the discovery of the toy box, David Parker Ray and Cindy Hendy are arrested. Ray claims he was just helping Vigil detox from her heroin addiction, and all the rough sex was consensual.
That was David's whole story, that any sex that they would have had during that time was consensual. She was a prostitute. He would pay her for that. This was his approach, and he was very, very confident in this kind of approach.
Meanwhile, the state police and the FBI set up a task force in nearby Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. They are convinced there must be more victims.
So what we were interested in doing was trying to kind of co-locate David with known missing persons. So if we could put David in the vicinity at the time that a particular person was reported missing, we could make some kind of a connection there and maybe follow that up as a lead and see if we could develop any evidence. What we were able to do was to show the possibility of upwards of 90 to 95 potential events, missing person events, that David Parker Ray was in that vicinity at the time. We can place him there at the time that person was reported missing.
But Ray's victims are tough to track. Typically, they are prostitutes or runaways, young women who won't be missed. After torturing and killing them, he cleverly hides the corpses in the vast New Mexico desert or in Elephant Butte Lake next to his home. Investigators can't find any bodies, despite finding Ray's hand-drawn treasure map.
This is Elephant Butte Lake, Elephant Butte Reservoir, and it's 42 miles long. When we found the map that had X's on it, for example, one X would be up there, what we call Kettle Top, the large plateau off in the distance. And then there would be other X's, like over here by Rattlesnake Island. There would be an X down here in this part of the lake, which leads down to the Elephant Butte itself. And we had dive missions in all of those places, but you kind of get an idea of the challenge you're facing. Even in the best of conditions, it's very, very difficult to locate something underwater.
David Parker Ray has operated under the radar for decades. The number of victims is unknown. He skillfully hides his crimes, and law enforcement doesn't even realize there is a serial killer on the loose. But not all psychopathic serial sexual sadists enjoy lurking in the shadows. Some crave the media spotlight, like the brutal serial murderer known as bind, torture, and kill. Law enforcement is searching for more victims of one of history's most horrific and cunning serial killers, David Parker Ray. They develop leads on a possible 95 victims that could have been abducted by the prolific murderer. Ray has operated totally under the radar for over 40 years. But meanwhile, a different breed of sadistic serial killer is on the loose, one who craves the spotlight. January 15th, 1974. It's a quiet morning in this Wichita neighborhood. An armed invader cuts the phone line and forces his way into this home. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, their 9-year-old son Joseph II, and 11-year-old daughter Josephine all hope this is only a robbery. The Oteros are bound and strangled to death, and there is clear evidence of sexual violence and torture. The young girl is hung on a pipe in the basement. The murderer masturbates on her lifeless body. The killer leaves no concrete leads, and the case goes cold. Then, in October, 3 suspects are taken into custody for the crime. And suddenly, a chilling letter arrives at the Wichita Eagle newspaper. The letter declares, "Those 3 dudes you have in custody are just talking to get publicity for the Otero murders. They know nothing at all. I did it by myself and with no one's help. Let's put it straight."
This was his homicide. He wanted credit for that. So he sends a letter to the press. Those 3 dudes that you are in custody did not do it. I did this. And then he begins to articulate that only someone who was at the crime scene would know the location and position of each of the bodies.
The writer signs the letter, "Yours truly, guiltily," with a postscript.
He then concludes with the fact that he will continue to kill, and he wants to be called BTK for bind, torture, and kill. And from now on, when you hear from me, it will be BTK.
The killer's real name is Dennis Rader. He's a church-going family man, respected in the community. Rader brutally murders at least 10 people. The hunt to find him will last over 30 years. Like David Parker Ray, he is also a psychopathic serial sexual sadist. But Dennis Rader is fueled by somewhat different desires. While David Parker Ray makes every effort to hide his crimes, Dennis Rader lobbies for publicity. Rader is thought to have been driven by narcissism. That means he feels he possesses unique talents and believes he's entitled to special treatment.
When he's a malignant narcissist, he gets off on the thrill that he's a threat, that he's somebody. In real life, he's nobody. But in this persona of the BTK, he's somebody to be reckoned with. And that's what's driving him.
Ray and Rader hunt for two different types of prey. David Parker Ray's anonymous victims go missing completely. But Dennis Rader targets ordinary citizens, and then he poses the corpses in provocative positions.
These victims were everyday people, residents of Wichita, Kansas. And basically, he had literally terrorized the city of Wichita because nobody knew where he would come in. People would come in, the first thing he would do is they'd go to their phone and pick it up to see if it was dead. That's how paranoid people became. Because in the newspapers it reported that he would cut the phone lines of each of these victims' houses. So that was one of his signatures.
After 3 more murders, Rader sends his next letter, asking, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?" David Parker Ray and Dennis Rader may be two different types of sexual sadists, but at their core, both are lethal psychopaths. So the key questions that still puzzle experts are, how do people become psychopaths? And then, how do they go on to be sadistic serial killers?
It's very important to make a distinction between what we would call primary and secondary psychopathy. It's certainly understood that the vast majority of serial killers are going to demonstrate some degree of psychopathy. But when we talk about primary psychopathy, we're referring to hereditary psychopathy, what we might call a bad seed. Secondary psychopathy is where an individual is so badly maltreated, neglected, abused, that the individual looks an awful lot like a person who from birth has this kind of proclivity, and it's sometimes difficult to tease them apart.
Dennis Rader had a fairly normal upbringing without any evidence of abuse, but he developed a fascination with torturing and killing animals.
If you look at his history, it would lead you to believe that this was a kid that had some issues when he was young. When he was a child, he admitted that he became sexually aroused when he watched his grandmother kill a chicken, and he wanted to replicate that. Children that do certain kinds of things, the killing of animals, those are kids that need watching, and those are kids that you need to attend to. But that never happened to Dennis Rader.
It appears David Parker Ray did suffer a cruel childhood. He grew up in an abusive, broken home. The socially awkward child was bullied in school, and in adolescence developed a fascination with drugs, pornography, sadomasochism, and murder. Ray claimed to have committed his first sadistic attack when he was a young teen, and he bragged about it in his journal.
Now you link psychopathy with sexual sadism, and what you have is a human predator.
Ray had a very peculiar split in his personality that seems to have developed in adolescence, where he was capable of viewing a woman as a good object that he could incorporate into his crimes, idealize a little bit, or view her as garbage. There's an infamous incident in the life of David Parker Ray where he told one of the female captives that he did not kill, if I recall. He turned to her and he said, "You know, if I had known that you were such a good woman, I wouldn't have thought of you as the type of person that I would torture in the toy box."
Another common trait of sadistic serial killers is their engagement in paraphilia, defined as abnormal sexual behaviors or impulses that play out through intense and recurring sexual fantasies and urges. The BTK Strangler always strives to perfect his techniques. He creates gruesome sketches and builds models of his fantasies.
He used a ball to strengthen his fingers because you have to keep your fingers very strong because it takes a lot to strangle someone.
Dennis Rader methodically scouts his victims and plans his attacks, all while carrying on with his normal life.
So in addition to being a church leader and a government worker for the city, he also was a Boy Scout leader, and they would go on camping trips. And he would use the camping trips as cover for him to go out and do a hit, because his wife believed he was on a camping trip. The kids were sleeping. He would leave the campsite, take a cab, go to the location that he had pre-surveilled, and attack his victim.
This aspect of planning their crimes is one area where Rader and Ray are alike.
In the case of BTK Dennis Rader and David Parker Ray, we see there's these tendencies to journal, to sketch things out, to plan out their future crimes. And this is both a way to relive the crimes that they committed in the past, to get pleasure out of it, much like we would look through a photo album of happy moments from the past, or to plan out the future crimes.
David Parker Ray even uses Barbie dolls in his planning.
He had taken these dolls and perverted them and turned them into kind of an action figure for S&M. I mean, they were naked. He had manufactured little devices to put on them, and they were decorations in his utility trailer.
What his disturbingly vivid diaries record is years of fantasies of torture that were worsened by the fact that he had an incredibly brilliant knack for creating devices, sort of technical devices.
Ray is a skilled mechanic and builder. At work, he is known to be a pack rat, bringing home scrap items to use on personal projects.
So this is the headquarters for the state park of Elephant Butte. David was employed here. He was employed with State Parks as a mechanic. If there were things that were left over, little bits and pieces that he could use, he would pack those away. We found a garage filled with it, just scrap and old tools and scrap metal. And that's some of the material he would use to create his devices. He had a ready supply of it right here at work.
For decades, Rader and Ray carried out their gruesome attacks. Ray feeling he's invincible and can't be caught, while Rader thinks he's smarter than the police and dares them to stop him before he kills again. Sadistic serial killers are the most brutal predators on the planet. David Parker Ray and Dennis Rader are two of history's most horrific examples of this kind of murderer. They both carry on their monstrous acts for decades. Their crimes are similar, but their motives and methods are very different. Often these crimes worsen over time as the killers habituate to the experience and need to intensify the sadistic acts to get the thrill they crave.
There are times where a sexually sadistic killer will jump immediately into serial killing. And in those cases, we tend to see where there's a slight escalation in the severity of their crimes, but more often we see it where they keep trophies of their offenses, and that helps them to relive the fantasy, to keep that high going that they had, and also the premeditation of their next crime.
Dennis Rader exhibits a rare behavior for a serial murderer. He is able to completely stop killing for long stretches of time. He takes 5 victims in 1974, 2 in 1977, then 1 a year in 1985, 1986, and 1991. His last correspondence with the press is received in 1988. Commander Vernon Gebreth is brought in as a consultant on both the Ray and BTK cases.
So he remained dormant. If you think about it, from 1988 to 2004, nobody heard anything about him. Now, the old caveat in cases like this is that the serial killer is either in jail or has died. Well, guess what? BTK just rewrote the book. It changed all the rules. He actually remained dormant all these years. Now, how did he do that?
Dennis Rader stashes away trophies taken from his victims and uses them to play twisted autoerotic games. He engages in self-bondage and takes selfies.
So Dennis Rader, in some instances, would actually wear the clothing of the victim or dress like the victim and put a mask over his face, okay, and put himself in the same position as the victims he had killed. And he was able to relieve himself sexually like that.
In one photo, he digs a shallow grave and wraps himself in plastic and wears a frightening mask. In another, he suspends himself upside down from the trees, all keeping the memories of his victims alive, fulfilling his fantasies, and allowing him to stop killing. By 2004, the case goes cold. It's assumed BTK is in jail or dead.
2004, he announces that he's back. And why is he making that announcement? Because the Wichita Eagle had a special front page edition 30-year anniversary of the BTK killings, which basically set him out again to come forth.
Over the next 12 months, BTK sends 11 communications confirming his role in several earlier murders, with gruesome photos and victims' driver's licenses and ID badges. One chilling letter confirms BTK's new intentions.
This letter was more intense. It was scary because he ends up with a threat. I have spotted a spoiled latchkey kid. Just have to work out the details. I think fall or winter would be just about right for the hit. So now he's putting the authorities on alert that he's now about to strike. He's identified his possible victim, and this is putting a whole new spin on it. The pressure on the authorities is unbelievable.
Now in Wichita, 30 years after BTK first appears, a long dormant horror is about to rear its head once again. David Parker Ray, the Toy Box Killer, and Dennis Rader, the BTK Strangler, are two of the most evil serial killers in the annals of crime. Both remain on the loose for decades. After 3 days of torture, Cynthia Vigil manages to escape. While David is out, she's able to overcome Cindy Hendy and get free. Finally, Ray's reign of terror comes to an end. Police find incriminating evidence at the crime scene, but the few victims that survived were so heavily drugged and brainwashed that their testimony is not considered credible. Investigators hunt for definitive evidence of murder. They continue to scour the desert and the lake for bodies, but they still come up empty. In the courtroom, the judge rules against playing Ray's introductory audio tape, and in the first trial, there's a hung jury. Prosecutors cannot let this monster go free, so they retry the case. Still, they can't convict Ray of murder without a body. But this time, the tape is played for the jury. And finally, in 2001, he is convicted for kidnapping and torture and is sentenced to 224 years in prison.
David showed zero remorse for anything. It wasn't that he didn't understand the ramifications of what he's doing. He just didn't care.
His daughter Jessie Ray cooperates with the prosecution and only receives probation. Cindy Hendy is sentenced to 36 years. She is released on probation in 2019 after serving half her sentence. Roy Yancey also cooperates and agrees to take police to the site of Marie Parker's body, but the body isn't there.
He realized that more than he knew where that body was. He went back, dug that body up, and put it someplace else. Very smart, very clever, very evil. So when Roy Yancey, who was arrested, admitted to what he had done, he actually brought the authorities out there. This is where the body was. But the body wasn't there anymore.
Roy Yancey is sentenced to 22 years for the murder of Marie Parker. David Parker Ray is sent to prison, but just 8 months later, he dies of a heart attack.
So he dies 8 months into his sentence at a prison facility in Hobbs, New Mexico. And it was frustrating for us because that ended any possibility we had, or the best possibility we had, of being able to take something to the families of his victims and say, here's what happened. These people are still at home with pictures of their daughters somewhere in that house, And that daughter is dead. She's gone. And we couldn't do anything about that. That is what was the frustration with David's death for all of us.
By 2004, 3 decades after Dennis Rader's first murder, the case had been declared cold. But then the letters and other correspondence flood into Wichita media outlets. The BTK Strangler's ego and narcissism are his downfall. Eventually, the police trick him into sending a floppy disk to the newspaper. Officers are able to trace the computer files to a desktop machine located at Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita. Quickly, they identify the source: Dennis Rader, president of the Congregation Council. BTK is finally stopped. In BTK's shocking courtroom confession, he describes his methods of trolling, then stalking his victims. Coldly, he refers to his targets as projects, like Catherine Bright, his 6th victim.
I had many, what I called them projects. They were different people in the town that I followed, watched. Kathleen Bright was one of the next targets. But anyway, it just was basically a selection process. Worked toward it. If it didn't work, I just move on to something else.
That part of the plea agreement was that he had to admit to each of these cases in front of the families of the victims, which he did. And when he articulated that, it was almost like he was reading a laundry list. No emotion. No emotion. He talked about, well, I realized they saw me, so I had to put them down. That's an expression used for animal control, putting them down. That's what he said. I had to put them down. Just like that.
The psychopath's lack of sympathy is clearly evident through BTK's 45-minute statement.
I strangled her with a belt. I took the belt off and retied that with pantyhose, real tight, and at that time masturbated her.
In August 2005, 60-year-old Dennis Rader receives 10 consecutive life sentences. Sadistic serial killers may carry no remorse or sympathy for their prey, but concern for the victims and their families must never be ignored.
I think that when we talk about serial killing, mass killing, spree killing, and we become interested in understanding how people can do these things and so forth, fascinated, horrified, sometimes simultaneously, what I have found often gets lost is the fact that what we're talking about are crimes that involved real human beings.
Given the fact that so many victims of serial killers are females and they're younger women, I find it really difficult to dissociate from that. When I see these crime scene photos, when I read about what had happened to these women, oftentimes I think that could have been me, or that woman looks like me, and it's really difficult to not feel the pain, to feel the fear that they must have felt when they were about to go through these horrible experiences, and I just want to be able to prevent this type of thing from happening in the future.
I think the right way to present these kinds of cases is to see if there's something to learn from them. I would like to see, whether it's David or BTK or anything else, a presentation of how does somebody evolve into this? How does that happen? And is there anything that can be done to prevent it? Because by doing so, you're literally saving somebody's life somewhere. You don't know them, but they have a family. They're important in their world, and they don't deserve to die the way these women die.